Now it's time for my perspective guest. And my guest today is a woman who's worked on some of the most significant worldwide human rights cases of recent years. From the murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi embassy in Istanbul to the poisoning of Alexei Navalny, Agnès Callamard has worked on all of them. Until 2021, she was UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial executions. She's now, of course, the Secretary General of Amnesty International. Her most recent work documented, well, in her new book. Here it is. It's called An Investigator at the UN. As you can see, a nice close-up of it there. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us on the programme today. Tell us, first of all, what you're aiming to achieve in the book. What's it about? What's the point of it?
Well, no one really knows what a special rapporteur does. No one really understands the kind of investigation that we do. And the investigations I've done generated a fair amount of interest. So I wanted to reach out to a bigger public. And the book is being published at a time when the UN is under a lot of duress, a lot of attacks, where there is an attempt by the superpower to basically destroy the United Nations and all multilateral institutions. So I do hope that the book will also be a reminder of what the UN can do, can deliver, can achieve, and what the world will be like if we did not have it.
I mean, it does give, doesn't it, a real insight into power, into diplomacy, pressure, also the personal risks that people take to try and ensure that human rights are upheld.
Absolutely, that justice is delivered. The book is also a way for me to pay homage, to celebrate all of those who have come to me. For Jamal Khashoggi, for instance, is Hatice Cengiz, Jamal's fiancée, who gave me a lot of trust. In the case of the murder of Ghislaine and Claude in Mali, the French journalist, it is also their families and the association of the friends of Ghislaine and Claude. All of those people who give me their testimonies, who give me really personal information, who tell me about their love for the people who have been killed. The book is also a way to tell them I've heard you. And it's about my respect, my deep, deep respect for them. Because without the families, let me be very clear, without the families, without the loved ones, justice will never be delivered. They are at the front of delivering justice. Let's
talk then about some of the cases. The murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi embassy in Istanbul, of course. What were you able to do as part of that? And what will your readers discover in the book?
Well, the reader discover how I have investigated. They also discover how I came to hear the recording of Jamal's killing, because it was an extraordinary episode, I will say, in diplomatic relations, that the consulate of Saudi Arabia was being monitored by the Turkish authorities, and everything was being recorded, including the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. And after much negotiation with the authorities, they gave me access to the recording. So in the book, I explain where we listened to those recordings, the impression, the experience that we had throughout. I recall how we felt listening to the last second of someone who was being murdered and who afterwards was being dismembered, the conversation of the killers. I think this is one of the most extraordinary, unusual dimension of that investigation. The others have been much more classical.
And how do you take something like that? I mean, for example, in the case of Alexei Navalny, how do you take something that happened to the next stage, to that point where you can try and defend the families and the friends of that person?
The next stage is really to ground the empirical evidence into a legal framework. The next stage is to demonstrate that the state or non-state actors was responsible for the killing. In the case of Jamal Khashoggi, it was to prove that the state of Saudi Arabia, and in particular Mohammed bin Salman, was responsible for that killing under international human rights law. In the case of Alexei Navalny, it was to argue that Russia, the government of Russia, was responsible for the killing, for the attempted killing of Alexei Navalny, and sadly, 2 years later for his actual killing. So that's the next stage, is to really bring back the state to the center of the investigation. My investigations are not so much about individual responsibility. They are about proving that the state, one state or several states, failed in their obligation to respect or protect the right to life of somebody.
And that must be incredibly difficult, notably in the case of Alexei Navalny. The poisoning happened on a plane. His death happened in a prison or in a colony in Russia. How on earth do you go about proving that when you're not there?
Well, you know, in that case, actually, Alexei himself proved that the state of Russia was responsible. If you recall, during my investigation, I was able to demonstrate the responsibility of the state of Russia because of the nature of the poison that was used. It was not only Novichok, a poison that has been developed solely by Russia, but it was also a new brand of Novichok that, according to the best expert in chemical weapon, could only have been processed, I will say, in the best Russian labs. So it was almost impossible for anyone else but the Russian authorities to be behind the attempted killing. Alexei himself, actually, when he recovered from that poisoning, went on to trick those responsible, and he got them on the phone to admit to having attempted to poison him.
Wanted to mention a case that's very personal for us here, perhaps less known for Anglophone audience. This is our radio colleagues at RFI, the murder of Ghislaine Dupont and Claude Verlon, the two journalists who were killed in Kidal in the north of Mali. How did you work on that?
Well, you know, like many of my investigation, it starts with a form of anger or a form of love. And here it's just both together. It's love for the family and the association of the friends, and it's anger over the attempt to make the story disappear. So it brought me to investigate with the support of many journalists who had already done an extraordinary amount of work before me. It allowed me as well to understand better what was happening in Mali at the time. Sadly, though, both the Malian authorities and the French authorities have been less than forthcoming in their collaboration. That investigation for me remains one of the most painful because unlike the other ones, I think this one, it was really difficult to penetrate the extraordinary deep walls of silence that had been built around the cases.
I wanted to ask you a bit about yourself. What drives you? I mean, having this job at the UN, now having this job at Amnesty and writing a book at the same time, how on earth do you take all that on, and where does it come from, this passion for you?
I'm inspired by the people I meet. I'm inspired by, like I said, Atiche Senghis, the fiancé of Jamal, the friends of Ghislaine and Claude. I'm inspired by the migrants that I have interviewed after they survived the drowning of their boat. I'm inspired by human rights defenders, and I get really, really upset, really angry by the state of the world. And I have a deep sense of justice and injustice, and I do truly believe that it is people around the world who can carry the flame for a better world. Sadly, at the moment, it is not with our governments. It is really with human rights defenders, with civil society, with average citizens who walk, who demonstrate, who write letters, and who say, not in my name, I want justice and I want peace. Those are those people that inspire me.
That does make a difference, you think?
Well, look, imagine the world without them. Imagine a world where people will give up. Imagine a world where people will not demonstrate against Russia's aggression of Ukraine. Imagine a world where people will not stand for Palestinians in Gaza. Imagine a world where no one will seek justice for Jamal. No one will seek to protect the most impoverished population. That world is not worth living in. This is a world that Donald Trump and others want to build. This is the construction of that world that we must resist. And I hope that my book, my work, and the work of thousands, millions of people around the world will prevent the worst.
And you hinted at this earlier on. Is the UN the answer to that? I mean, there's a lot of criticism, isn't there, that the UN, it just doesn't have the teeth that it needs or the ability to be able to solve all the world's problems.
Look, the UN is a product of what member states do. I want to really insist on that. I think, the UN agencies, whether they are a World Health Organization, whether they are the High Commissioner for Human Rights, they deliver their mandate. The problem is what member states do. What member states do, in particular at the Security Council. Peace and security should be done by the Security Council. What do we have? We have 5 superpowers, 3 of which are using their vetoes right, left, and center to prevent any kind of meaningful action. One, Russia is responsible for the breakdown of international law and for aggressing Ukraine. Another one, the United States is complicit of a genocide in Gaza. This is not the UN. These are the political bodies that have been established after World War II and that right now have become obsolete because of our own action, because of the actions of those governments.
Good to talk to you on the programme today. Thank you very much for coming in. Agnès Callamard was UN Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial executions, now, of course, Secretary General of Amnesty. The book is called Une enquête à ONU. It is hopefully going to be in English at some point as well, but at the moment just in French. Thanks ever so much for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Here on France 24.